I don't think our next speaker needs too long of an introduction. I just want to say we're so pleased that once again an Irish ambassador to the United States has chosen an Irish Network USA conference as one of the first official engagements. That's quite a huge honor for us, and we've had several of your predecessors join us in the past, back to Ambassador Collins, and Ambassador Anderson was a great friend, and Ambassador Walhall, of course. For those of you who spent time with us in Fort Lauderdale last year know how generous he was with his time in Fort Lauderdale. It wasn't hard to get him into the sun, of course. I think he enjoyed the weather more than anything. But we've had great friends in the embassy. We've had great friends in all the consulates across the United States. You guys have been wonderful. And Ambassador, this is something you and I and Mark and our executive board, I'm sure we'll talk about throughout your term here. Your consular staff and your embassy staff is absolutely amazing. We call them, and there's a response all the time. Hopefully they call us, and hopefully we return that sort of response, and we want to be an extension of the great work you're doing. So with that, Ambassador, your history is so impressive. You're certainly not new to the United States, like we said when we put out the bio. I think Joe did a great job talking about Ireland exporting peace, and you've been a big part of that at UN for all those years. So with that, Ambassador Geraldine Byrne Nason, it's a great pleasure to have you here this morning.
Thanks so much, Steve, and thank you, Joe. It's really great to be here. Early Saturday morning, I apologise for that. I can see the shamrocks from here as well. That will keep me spirited. And of course, as speakers have said, I'm new to this role, 5 weeks in. So I'm living a lot of firsts. My first stop in Cleveland, my first Irish Network USA conference, and my first of my monthly visits to Cleveland. So thank you, Joe, for the invitation, and we'll work on my scheduling when I get back. It's really great to be here. Thanks to Steve, and a big thanks to Mark also for making me so welcome and for making this visit a reality. Even if it's a short one this time, more seriously, really am so deeply impressed by the commitment and the knowledge and the warmth that even in the 24 hours I've been here, I've picked up on. So I want to say a huge thank you. And to all the team at the Great Irish Network. I know it's been probably a Herculean effort to pull this together. You're out of area all the time, and as a diplomat I know what that means. And so I want to say a big thank you. And I also wanted to say thanks for recognising what the consulates do. Dermot, with me here this week, prepared all of the engagements and has been deeply involved and will be going forward in the work with colleagues here in Cleveland. So we're laying a very solid base. You know, what I'm seeing here day by day, in my 5 weeks specifically in Cleveland, is really what I like to think about as the reality of the Irish-American footprint. You know, I said last night, Boston and New York claim it. They believe it's theirs. But I can see that here the imprint in a city like Cleveland is deep, and it's a meaningful, substantive input. So it's not a surface-like commitment to wearing up the green. It's an actual day-by-day lived experience, which I think is really important. When I met with Ambassador Ed Crawford yesterday, an Ohio man, proud Irish heritage, he spoke of the work, for example, at that beautiful Irish cultural garden. Again, you know, a clear expression of people wanting to not just talk about it, but actually do something about those bonds. And the bonds are ones of ancestry, we all know that, and they're bonds of affinity, an affinity that is precious, of course, but for me the important part of it is that it propels our ambition going forward. We all find time to reflect, of course, on the past, but the important thing is that we now use our position here as a family, to use your term, Steve, going forward, and that we have ambition for each other in what we're doing. I'm so thrilled, I can't not say it again, that Aer Lingus has introduced direct flights between Dublin and Cleveland. What is really, at one level, a marketing and a logistical decision will actually have quite profound implications, I think, for the relationship. I mean, the important thing is really the ties that bind us, and this just opens the door to facilitate direct ties. And our unique ties with the diaspora, of course, haven't always been forged by new airline lines. They've been forged in very hard times, and really in the adversity of a troubled Irish history that you're all so familiar with. In the past, as people left Ireland, and it's amazing that we're here on the 200th anniversary of the first Irish person here. I'm sure it was a woman who, but the first people who arrived on these shores really came with very little, as you know, and I often say, to misquote Oscar Wilde, they came with just their genius to declare, really. But they immediately built communities, founded country associations, benevolent societies, sporting organisations, and as the Irish people came here and sought to make this great country their home, they were really, from the beginning, constructing virtual as well as real networks of solidarity, supporting all who followed them. I think that has always distinguished us as the Irish community. We look after our own. My own favourite, absolute favourite Irish proverb is Ar scath chéile ó Aran Nadini. Translated directly, it means in each other's shelter that we live, and not shadow but shelter. We look after each other wherever we are, and I don't think there's a people anywhere that really express that in the way they have conducted themselves, like Irish America. I think that proverb was probably developed for Irish America. Happily, and very happily, the Irish Americans, Irish who come to America and Irish America now, no longer battling in the same way for their place in this great American tapestry as they were when they came off the boats in the 19th century. Today, I think you, Steve, or maybe Joe mentioned this, to be found in absolutely every walk of American life, whether that's the courts, the schools, theatre, police, the defence forces, business, and in leadership roles, importantly, across the US in politics. You're shaping the society that you came originally with very little. You've now helped to shape and influence the future of this country. And for me, that says you're a gifted community, you're influential, and that the genius and creativity, which was all you had as you got off the boat, you brought that now into play and leveraged it in the best possible way. The Irish government, I have to say, is 100% committed to strengthening our engagement with the 21st century diaspora that we have. I think we're unique internationally in the attention and the political support we put into engaging with our own diaspora internationally. We've just published a new diaspora strategy in November 2020, aimed at engaging and supporting all of our, here in the United States, our 50 million who claim to be part of the Irish diaspora. We take a very broad and an inclusive definition to that diaspora, and I think that's absolutely appropriate. It's one that reflects the rich diversity of the global community and those with an affinity for Ireland. I said last night, I can't say it often enough, I am so deeply proud to represent a modern, progressive Ireland, and I'll be frank, it's not the Ireland I grew up in, but it's now the Ireland that I'm very proud to represent. It's and we see a key component in that modern Ireland is the diaspora, and the diaspora's role in shaping that 21st century Ireland, that sense of what being Irish means, and in bolstering what I think is such an asset here in the United States, which is a real deep sense of Irish American identity. We put a premium on that, such a premium really, that we have a dedicated unit in our foreign ministry which has specific responsibility for dealing with Irish abroad, with you, with your families, with your communities. That unit in the ministry has a role on policy, but it also has an important role in resourcing the activities of the Irish community abroad, a funded budget for supporting Irish community organisations. It's a unique programme, and we have an element of that that's designed as an emigrant support programme. It provides funding to non-profits and to projects that support Irish communities overseas. I think it's an excellent means to facilitate the development of improved links between Ireland and the global Irish community. Irish Network USA, and I think some of its affiliates here today, have been engaging with that programme, receiving support from that, and I can only highly recommend that you continue to do that. It's a structured way to access the political and financial support the government is offering to all of you. As was mentioned in the introduction, I've just finished a tour as Ireland's ambassador to the UN, the privilege of a lifetime, where I was able to lead the Irish team for a once-in-a-generation opportunity to sit on the UN Security Council. There we promoted Irish values, and I could almost put a full stop there, and it could take weeks to talk about that. But I will say that one of the key aspects of that was the empathy that we developed as a country based on our troubled experience of conflict, of migration, of hunger. They were at the heart of the way we explained who and what we were to the voters. We had to get ourselves elected to this role at the UN. But importantly, I think if you think of those three factors, conflict, migration and hunger, they are the markers for so many countries internationally. The Security Council spends 60% of its time looking at issues on the continent of Africa, and conflict, migration and hunger are trademarks, unfortunately, of those countries that we deal with. So Ireland's own direct experience was hugely relevant, and we continue to see a role like that on the Security Council as Ireland's responsibility. So not just an opportunity, but a responsibility to take up the duty and to make a positive impact in the world. I think that our reputation, and I would say a well-deserved one, for empathy, but also for fair-mindedness, and our commitments to a rules-based international order, to respecting fundamental human rights, were absolutely key to getting ourselves at that top table of global diplomacy, but then to our success. And if I'll just say a word about what we did on the Council, I think the bigger macro picture is that we kept our commitment to that fairness and to humanity. We kept that out to the fore. One of the examples I often use is that we took the lead alongside Norway in negotiating to put on the table a resolution for millions of people who are trapped at the Turkish border in Syria, about 5 million people, 4.5 to 5 million people, in tent city extraordinaire. It's hard to imagine a tent city that has millions of people. This does. It's at a place called Bab al-Hawa, and there we negotiated safe passage across that border for medicines, for food, for shelter, for the people who are there after 10 years of a horrific conflict in Syria. Now we did that, critically had to negotiate with the Americans and the Russians, and we had to do that this year in an environment after Russia's illegal invasion of Ukraine. It made it very challenging diplomatically and politically, but the fact is our role, I think, helped to ensure humanity won through, and we kept that one crossing into those millions of people open. I also, feel that when I speak about human rights, that I believe that women's rights are human rights, and so Ireland took a lead role as the coordinator, the chair actually, of the work on women, peace and security. And there, our peace process in Northern Ireland was a huge inspiration for the way we addressed that work. I believe that if women hadn't been at the negotiation table for the Good Friday Agreement, we may not have had as sustainable an agreement as we've had now for almost 25 years. So as a reflection of how we value that, we took a very forward position on including women, insisting that women be in the room and at the table for peace negotiations, whether that's in Yemen, in Syria indeed, or importantly, a very forward position on women in Afghanistan, believing and saying publicly that the Taliban can't be given free rein when it comes to the rights of women and girls, their access to education, their right to freely travel. So we have marked ourselves out by our commitment to humanity, to human rights, and to fair-mindedness. Just a couple of the ways we did that. I could clearly talk for a long time about this, and I won't, but just to signal to you that we did really quite exceptional work on climate security, on a conflict in northern Ethiopia. I was the facilitator on the Security Council of the Iran nuclear deal. Ireland pulls no punches. We really do our job very seriously when we're given the opportunity on the global stage. I think we're an authentic voice, and we're an independent voice, importantly, and the values and the principles you recognise in each other, you recognise in Irish representatives. That's what we brought to that global table as we finish up there now at the end of this year. But our commitment to activism on the global stage isn't just limited to those high tables of diplomacy. It translates straight through into business and being on the ground, concerned about people's individual economic futures. And I think the strength of our economic relationship, evident yesterday, I see good examples of it here to the left for Cork. But you should know the big picture is that 900 US firms employ 190,000 people in Ireland, and it's a reciprocal relationship. I can't say that often enough. It's reciprocal. As Irish companies here in the United States, we create 100,000 jobs, which I think, if you think scale to scale, is a very significant contribution to the US economy. And I was remarkably happily surprised as I arrived in this new job to see that Ireland's the 9th FDI, so the 9th foreign direct investor here in the United States. Again, if you think of size and scale, that's a remarkable number. It's due to a range of factors, I would say. A young, highly educated, English-speaking workforce. Our membership of the European Union, absolutely, we're a gateway to Europe and will continue to be that. And our own strong, growing economy. And if I can just, as a final point, make political stability. Political stability and governance make for good business. They make for good opportunity. And I think Ireland has marked herself out, in spite of all of our difficulties over time as we get to 100 years, in having a stable, solid system of governance, a legal framework that is renowned and one that attracts and supports business on the ground. I think that certainty and that stability means that we're very well placed to continue our success in the global economic stakes now as we emerge from the pandemic. I'd have to, in this company, of course, say that Brexit continues to be a very significant challenge for us. We thought a few weeks ago we were at the point where there was a good moment to reset EU-UK relations. We'll have to wait a little bit longer now, I think. But it is positive that behind the scenes, it doesn't make the headlines, that technical work has begun again. We were waiting since last February for this to happen, but last week technical work began between EU and UK officials on the nitty-gritty of the protocol. And we now need to leave a little bit of space for that to engage and the progress to develop. The EU, I have to say, I'm a former ambassador to the EU. I know what the regulatory regime in Brussels looks like. I have never seen the EU as flexible as it is in this negotiation on the outstanding issues on the protocol. What we now need from the United Kingdom government is partnership and vision and compromise. That's what created the Good Friday Agreement in the first place. Strong partnership between the British and Irish governments is fundamental to both of us, but certainly remains vital for peace and prosperity on the island of Ireland. And we will continue to urge what will now be next week, I hope, a new incoming UK government to engage with the EU, to get down to business and to recognise that the recent political and economic turbulence in the UK should not really be a cause for concern when it comes to looking after the important issues in Northern Ireland. We also want to try and avoid an election in Northern Ireland. Some of you may know it's a legal requirement if the Assembly and the Executive are not in place by the 28th of October. So you can see it's a very short time away. There's a legal requirement for the Secretary of State in Northern Ireland to call elections. We don't want to see elections in Northern Ireland. We don't think it's in the interests of the people in Northern Ireland who are now facing, I think, a very big economic challenge, given what's happening in London, but also the post-pandemic high inflation like you're seeing in this country, challenging everyone internationally. We want to see Northern Ireland back in business with the democratically elected leaders of Northern Ireland doing what they were elected to do to lead their community. You know that our own state agencies are expanding their presence here in the United States, and as we are making our case for Ireland as a gateway to Europe, they are, on our behalf, coming very often into your areas where you all work and live, showing what a great place to invest, study and do business we are. I was with our Finance Minister, Pascal Donoghue, during the IMF World Bank meetings in Washington just a week ago, and the Secretary of State, Janet Yellen, said the United States has the great fortune to have such a friend as Ireland, and we took that as a badge of honour. You'll know that, of course, we're marked, apart from our economic success and our political stability, we're very marked by our own sense of what I think is a powerful cultural identity. Irish culture, deeply rooted in the interconnections that we make right across the globe. And we bring the global and the local together in that cultural space. For centuries, Irish people have turned outwards, not always by choice, but as islanders, we look out, and in doing so, wherever we go, we're carrying our traditions of song, story, poetry, dance, right across the world. They're part of what we are. They're part of our creative talent, and we have interwoven that with our political and economic activities for a very long time. And I can tell you, even at the UN, we brought that very strong sense of this is part of the expression of being Irish. We brought that into the UN. We always say that the global Irish experience was mediated through cultural expression. I think that's an important recognition that goes right back to the monks and the illuminated manuscripts, going right across continental Europe, creating colleges, through to the influence of Irish folk here in the US on folk music, on traditional music, American folk dance, the imprints of Irish design and architecture, the White House starting off with an Irish architect, but we see Irish artists, particularly in the 21st century, really finding their place here in the United States. And to make sure that we can grow that and to support it, we have now introduced special cultural officers, one in Los Angeles, focusing, as you can imagine, very much on screen industries, and one in New York with a wider mandate. And they're going to drive our cultural promotion right across the USA. They'll be bringing our peculiar, deep and very specific cultural approach to everything we do and amplifying our presence. And so I think you can be sure they'll come to a place near you very soon. And I'd encourage you to engage with them, because they, again, are a support to the Irish network, to individual projects on the ground. The fact is that by strengthening those kind of bonds, we're making both the American part of Irish America and the Irish part of Irish America stronger, and there's a real resonance between the two. So, in conclusion, I know you're going to have what you called a loose day. I'm kind of a bit disappointed I'll be missing some of that, but I know that it'll be a really productive day. I know that you will all be focused on what unites us, which is that common sense of identity and the ambition going forward. I spoke about the young girls from St. Joseph's last night because I see it as a key part of my mandate to work with the next generation. Not this next generation of Irish America is a generation further away again from families who were born in Ireland and maybe from a little bit of knowledge and exposure to Ireland. So I think it's incumbent on all of us to see what Irish American identity means to them, how they want to express it, and that we surround them with the support, and certainly the Irish government will do that, for the next generation of Irish Americans coming through. We've managed to do this for centuries, clearly, here in Cleveland. You've done it brilliantly for 200 years. We've done it over the miles and over time. And as I assume my new role here, leading Team Ireland in the USA, I can assure you there'll be absolutely no lack of energy working with our 9 offices, including the embassy. We're now 9 offices across the US to do what you need of us, and we will be partners, supporters, friends, and I never tire of saying we're as useful as you make us. But I'll conclude with our current Taoiseach, Micheál Martin, has a favourite proverb, Nín Neart go Cur le Chéile. We are strong when we pull together in the same direction. I know you'll be doing that here today, and I want to thank you very much indeed. Thank you.